give everyone here a context for why we have these books here, why we're giving you these books, and what's to come in the future regarding these books, this topic, and this author. And I have a series of slides. I know you spend most of your class time with, sometimes people are talking to you too long. I'll try to make this as quick and painless for you all as possible. And if you have questions, please ask me in the moment that you have the question. You can interrupt me and just ask your question if you do have a question. A few things I want to make clear before we start. So I understand one thing, it lets us know, it lets us add to the count of how many people RSVP'd, but it also allows me to have your email, and then when we have other events on this topic, on this book, then I can reach out to you. So if there's future events about any kind of book readings, any kind of exhibitions, any kind of film screening that has to do with this book, then I can have your email and reach out to you. If you've RSVP'd through the form, I already have your email. So you're good if you did that. If you didn't, you can fill out the name and email sheets that are over on the other side. The other thing is, a reminder, today is a Monday schedule. So if you happen to be sitting here and you're like, oh, I may not supposed to be here. It is fine. If you do not know it's a Monday schedule, that's fine. You can do as you need to do and head out. But I just want to make sure everyone knows it is a Monday schedule, not a regular Thursday schedule. So we're all on the same page here. And if you do, this lasts from 12 to 2. And so being that it's a party, you come, sit and listen, hang out for a bit, and then head out. Just make sure before you head out, you grab a book and a little bit of food to go, if you don't plan on staying that long. Another thing I wanted to mention is you're not required to having read the book today. So many of you received the book just now or in the past. So, you're not expected to, do anything in the ways of answer questions about any characters in the book or anything like that. This is just an introduction for all of you. And I feel like I had a third thing, and that has just slipped my mind. So let's hope that comes to me at some point. But I'll start off already. So my name is Emma Antobam-Ntekudzi, and I am one of the reference and instruction librarians here at BCC. This is also a chance for you all to kind of see the librarians and see some of our other, our library workers. So we also have Professor Nelson Santana, who's working the camera here, and he is our collection development and deputy chief librarian. We also have Professor Leroy Lawton, who is our head of learning services at the BCC. And we have our chief librarian, Michael Miller, who is with a few of our other library teams. So Michael Khan, Tukumbo Adeshina, and Catherine Parsons, also part of the library team. And over on that side, Cynthia and Oscar, I have to shout you out. So we got Cynthia Tovar, who's our archivist, and Oscar is our assistant for the archive. And last but not least, our lovely Ronnie Springer. She's also one of our best at the library. Okay, so let's get started. So we did introductions. So this is just to let you know what I'm going to go through with you. So I'll talk about BCC Reads, I'll talk about the grant, I'll talk about The Bluest Eye a little bit, just so you have an idea of what you're going to be reading if you haven't read it already. So I'm not going to tell you about all of it, but just so you have a synopsis of what you're going to step into when you start reading it. And then we'll also talk about Toni Morrison, a phenomenal writer. She passed away in 2019, but she's left such wonderful works that are American classics, and she herself is a writing legend. So, and then I'll also cover a little bit of the library resources. What is a party without learning about the library? What's a party in the library without that? So I'll talk a little bit about that, but it's really for your benefit. I think it'll give you a chance to see where you can find out more information about the book, about the author, and her other writings that we have as well, and then also about her bio. So we have all that information that you can find on Toni Morrison in the library. You can also find a lot of info about her online too. So she's very well known and critically acclaimed. And then I'm going to mention the very next event, which is happening next week in Roscoe Brown Center Playhouse. So when I get to that, we'll talk more about it. I do have a couple of videos, 2 short videos that I'm going to play, just so that you know that you're going to be listening to some interviews that Toni Morrison has done. And that's just to expose you to just how wonderful she is at answering, questions and but expounding on her work. I adore her, and the interviews are great, so I hope you enjoy them too. And they also relate to the book. All right, so we'll start.
Quote by Toni Morrison: "If there's a book that you want to read, but it hasn't been written yet, then you must write it."
Thank you, Ramis. So that quote kind of sums up all of her writings. She has said plenty of times that the books she's written are books that she's wanted to read, particularly the first book. The first book, which is The Bluest Eye, that set the stage for the types of stories that she wanted to read and the kinds of people that she wanted to talk about, which were not being talked about or covered in the literature at the time that she began writing. Now, we'll get into that quote a little later, but before I get to that, I wanted to discuss the program BCC Reads. So BCC Reads is a program that began prior to the pandemic, and it was started by Dr. Monique Guichard, and I'm going to click here. And some of you have her as your professor. Some of you already have her as your professor. So she began this program, and in starting this program, it consisted of a committee of faculty from various departments and also programs. The library was also involved. So at one point we had our outreach librarian who was on the committee, and we also had our chief librarian who's on the committee as well. The readings that were chosen, so it was one book that was chosen by the committee, and that book would be integrated into the curriculum, and it would also spark events on campus that were inspired by that specific book. And I have images of the books that have been chosen in the past. Then the pandemic arrived, and I think all of us were just trying to survive the pandemic. And aside from just individually trying to live through the pandemic, there are also programming, classes, there are a lot of things that kind of fell by the wayside. And so the BCC Reads program also kind of just fell by the wayside. It didn't go away, it just wasn't as robust as it was prior to the pandemic. Now, in comes the library. So this is a session that brings you into the library world. You may never need to know any of this information unless you end up on Jeopardy or something, but I think this is a good background for you to get an idea of how we're revising it and where the funding to revise it is coming from. So there is an organization called the American Library Association, and so the librarians that you see here and the librarians that you meet in other spaces and other library spaces are, we're part of the ALA, in spirit or yes, we're part of ALA. That's what I'll say. So we're all kind of under the umbrella of ALA. ALA is a premier organization that represents libraries in the United States, and it also has an international arm to it. So it's also a premier organization for librarians internationally. And this association provides money. And so this money can go to libraries like ours to do special programming, or if it's not programming, some gap that needs to be filled, and whatever money that they provide might be able to do that, like maybe updating equipment or ordering equipment for students. So ALA provides money for libraries to beef up whatever's going on in the library and in their community. And so this specific grant that we were able to use for acquiring these books and then also providing events for you in the future, this comes from a grant called the Building Library Capacity Grant. And the funding from that grant comes from the Andrew Mellon Foundation. So Andrew Mellon Foundation provides the money, the ALA organization distributes the money. And so this, as I mentioned, is to provide aid to libraries. This grant specifically was to help with any libraries that kind of suffered during the pandemic. So that, our library and our institution did suffer during the pandemic. And so myself, Nelson Santana, Chief Michael Miller, we decided to go for this grant, and the goal was to work on revising a BCC Reads that the library could host. And we were one of 17 winners. So our library did win that proposal, and the goals for that proposal are to boost morale on campus. So that's also something that I think we've all noticed since the pandemic. Morale has kind of gone down, but it's coming back up with many of us being on campus. There's still programming on campus that happens with student activities. So that's coming up, and we wanted to be part of that. We wanted to contribute to that. And we want everyone to kind of have fun and learn. So this is part of the goals of the proposal that we wrote. And as I mentioned before, we won. And then we're able to now get the ball rolling on executing all of that. So providing the books to you, and then also providing programming for you around this. So now, the book. So The Bluest Eye, it's Toni Morrison's first novel. So it's really like her seminal work. And it was published in 1970, and the settings takes place in the Depression era, 1941. What else was going on at that time? World War II was still going on at that time too. And it takes place in Lorain, Ohio, which is her hometown. And the focus is on an 11-year-old black girl. Her name is Nicola Breedlove. The novel is divided into seasons, and so she divides the novel into seasons for very specific reasons. Authors are artists, and so they make their decisions very thoughtfully and methodically. And so for those who end up reading the book, you'll understand that the seasons coincide with the events of the book. And There are many themes in The Bluest Eye. So The Bluest Eye is incredibly rich. It has a lot of depth to it. And there are many things that she touches on in The Bluest Eye. She's a very deep writer. Some of the themes include the socially constructed ideal of beauty, specifically speaking, Eurocentric ideals of beauty that kind of overshadow the main character in the novel. And as the title states, The Bluest Eye, this is a young black girl who does not have blue eyes and sees this in white neighbors and feels that she wants blue eyes. That's what's beautiful to her. And so she is someone who wishes she had blue eyes, among other things. And so there is this idea of what is socially acceptable and what is beautiful is something that's closest to whiteness for this character. And that's something that's explored in the book. That's just one of the many things explored in the book. There is also the impact of internalized racism in this novel, and the young girl goes through, that, as well as characters around her go through that as well. So that's just some themes in the book. So as you get ready to start reading it, you can think about some of what you've heard here and just kind of prepare yourself. All right, now, trigger warnings. So as I mentioned, Toni Morrison covers very serious, mature topics. And so for transparency, I have to provide trigger warnings with The Bluest Eye. And so these warnings are not to tell anyone not to read, not at all. It is just to let you know there are topics in this book that are explored and covered, and this is just some of that. Again, it is a book that is rich that covers a lot of ground. It's also emotional. So I definitely want to make that clear to everyone who's going to begin reading this book. And sometimes that's like a theme that follows with a lot of Morrison's books after The Bluest Eye. So she definitely talks about things that people may not want to talk about, but is in existence. As a result of those trigger warnings, this book has landed on the banned book list for years, and it was not well received when it was first published. So what is the banned book list? ALA, which you now know ALA. There is the Office of Intellectual Freedom that collects and creates a list of banned books, and they've been doing this since, I think, 1990? Yes, 1990. And this is to bring awareness to the problems with censorship, challenging books, and banning books. So that is why that list exists. Librarians are proponents of the First Amendment, so we are all very aware of the freedom of speech. There's also freedom of access to information. And so in providing this list and making the public aware of censorship, the Office of Intellectual Freedom and all librarians are trying to uphold that First Amendment. Now, moving on from that, I think I had stated earlier that the book is officially an American classic. It is part of the canon, the American canon. So her writings have been deemed to represent the Black American experience of the era that she's writing. So it is an American classic. Many schools, K through 12 schools, and colleges will require you to read her book, and there's many classes that just focus on Toni Morrison. I mean, there's just so much. People write dissertations and papers about her, so she is solidified in American literary history. And this book introduced her style and her form. So when you start reading this title, you'll notice her form is poetic and evocative. So you get a lot of emotion out of her reading. And a major part to her writing is that this book made sure to focus on Black characters. And it's just very raw and real regarding the characters that she focuses on. And that was one of the things she wanted to make sure that she started off her writing career with, focusing on Black characters and writing to a Black audience. That was very important. So one of the clips, she will discuss that briefly, and she'll say it better than I can.
After I got into publishing, I took it more seriously. I had written little things before. And I was very shy about it, although I liked it. When I was a teacher at Howard, I had joined a writers group. And it was fun. It was social. They had great food. There were colleagues of mine. And at some point, they wouldn't let you just continue to bring your little high school essays or whatever. So I had to write something new. And I began a story that was later incorporated into the first novel I wrote.
The Bluest Eye.
The Bluest Eye.
Yes.
And I just left it there. But later on, when I was in Syracuse, getting ready to move to New York, I began to work that story a little bit more in the evenings. And I think it was not only because I sort of was interested in it, in the plot. I felt compelled at that time, this is mid-60s, most of what was being published by Black men were very powerful, aggressive, revolutionary fiction or nonfiction. And also they had a very positive, racially uplifting rhetoric to go with it. All of which was stimulating, but some of which I, as an older person, thought, wait a minute. One of which was, you are my black queen, black is beautiful. And I thought, yeah, but why so loud? Then I thought, wait a minute, they're going to skip over something. And no one's going to remember that it wasn't always beautiful, you know. No one's going to remember how hurtful a certain kind of internecine racism is. The things I talked to you about earlier, about being at Howard and how people were privileged because of these physical characteristics.
That's right.
And some people felt very apologetic because their skin was very, very dark. See, we used to call each other names, obviously, when we were kids, but I didn't think it was, like, serious, that you could actually take it in. So when I wrote The Bluest Eye, it was about that. Before we all decide that we are all beautiful and have always been beautiful, let me speak for just a moment here for some of us who didn't get that right away. You know? So I was deeply concerned about the feelings of being ugly.
There you go with the feelings again.
That's right, just how it feels.
Yes.
How it feels. So you've got the most vulnerable people in the world, which are children, female black children who have never held center stage in anything. If they appear in a book, they're a joke or, you know, just some color, a local color, or a little walk-on part. The least important. Now, black women have sometimes held center stage in some books by blacks, even sometimes by white. But then, they were maids, cooks, housekeepers, they were really running. But the children were always lesser. So I wanted to have a little hurt black girl at the center of this story. And it was difficult because focusing on her only was just too depressing,
Yes.
because you lose some of the thrill of being young. There is some thrill to it,
Yes.
So I surrounded her with people who were more like myself and my sister.
So people will understand
That's right.
what it means
That's right.
to be treated in that way.
That's right.
That's very, very good. Very powerful.
That was a big motive in writing that book.
Absolutely. And probably in many of your books.
Oh yeah, carried, it continued to be an interesting, thread.
I just want to make those. All right, one thing. So now on to the author herself. Again, critically acclaimed, Toni Morrison is a legend of American literature. And she's written 11 novels, 8 total have received awards or they're most known. We have those 8, so and hopefully I'll be able to show you how to find those in the library. When we get to the library resources segment, her given name at birth is Chloe Wolford, Chloe, last name Wolford, and when she was confirmed, she did a Catholic confirmation, and when you do a Catholic confirmation, you pick a saint's name. And the saint name she picked was Saint Anthony. So Chloe Anthony Wolford. Well, Chloe Ardelia Wolford first, then I think Anthony placed Ardelia. Now, she shortened Anthony to Toni and kept her ex-husband's name Morrison. And so the pen name Toni Morrison was created. She graduated from Howard. She also graduated from Cornell. This is only just some of the universities where she worked as a professor. She was a professor probably at just about every Ivy League that I could think of, including what's listed here, Howard, Princeton, Texas Southern University. She was also at Rutgers, which is in New Jersey. She was at SUNY, State University of New York. And she's received honorary degrees from the same colleges where she has had an affiliation with. Either she's worked there, or she has done other kinds of work with those institutions. She was an editor of Random House Publishing, and that's kind of when she began writing the story, her first story, which took her 5 years to write. I believe she was still a publisher at Random House at that time, but also teaching as well. And these are, again, some of the awards. So some of the places she's worked, some of the awards that she's received. She's received so many, I couldn't fit them on 1 or even 2 slides. I think these are the probably most notable: Pulitzer Prize for fiction for Beloved. This is a photo of her receiving the Nobel Prize in Literature. She's in Stockholm at the time. And she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which was the previous picture. So former President Barack Obama is giving her the Presidential Medal of Freedom in this image. So she's critically acclaimed. Her books are critically acclaimed. She's just really a phenomenal writer. And her birthday is this month, so yay, February. Now, The White Gaze. This is another video that's about 7 minutes where she discusses something called the white gaze, as well as other things. She discusses the freedom, her freedom in writing, her liberation in writing. And I'll let her kind of delve into what she means by that.
Bill Moyers, I think, once asked you the question, can you imagine writing a novel that's not centered about race? And you said absolutely.
Yes.
Will you?
That's what he asked me. I think, see, I answered the question he didn't pose. You know, Tolstoy writes about race
Yeah.
all the time. So does Zola, so does James Joyce. Now, if anybody can go up to an imaginary James Joyce and say, you write about race all the time. It's central in your novels. When are you going to write about what? Because you see, the person who asks that question doesn't understand that he or she is also raced. So to ask me when am I going to stop, or when, if I can, is to ask a question that, in a sense, is its own answer. Yes, I can write about white people. White people can write about black people. Anything can happen in art. There are no boundaries there. Having to do it or having to prove that I can do it is what was embarrassing or insulting. In this book, I did.
It was insulting that people, help me understand, what was insulting? The idea that you felt like you had to prove that you could write without...
Yeah, the question was posed as though it were a desirable thing to do,
Right.
to write about white people or to write not about race. That's what that means to
Right.
me. And that it was a difficult thing to do, a higher level of artistic endeavor, or it was more important, and that I was still writing about marginal people, and why don't I come into the mainstream?
Aren't you importing too much into the question?
Maybe.
I think so.
Well, what else could it be, Charlie? What does that mean? What does that question mean? You tell me if I'm making too much.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know that I don't think it probably means, I didn't ask the question, so I don't think it probably means, but I don't think it had to do about you were marginalizing by not writing about.
It only works if I can go to William Styron, well, maybe not William Styron because he has done it, somebody, major, white, and say, as a journalist.
Can you write about black people?
That's right. Can I say that? What kind of question is that to put to Ed Doctorow, who has done it, by the way?
Sure.
But I mean, if I can say, when are you going to write about black people to a white writer, if that's a legitimate question to a white writer, then it is a legitimate question to me. I just don't think it is. You know, so the glove has to be pulled inside out. If in other words, it's not a literary question. It has nothing to do with the literary imagination. It's a sociological question that should not be put to me. I couldn't ask that of any writer who was, you know, I wouldn't ask it of a black writer when you're going to write about white people. Now, maybe I'm wrong. You can tell me now or later if I've blown it up all out of proportion. I don't think so. I just don't know what the question means except what I think it means. You think it may just be a little question, a little curious, you know, small incidental question. When are you going to... Maybe I'm responding because I have had reviews in the past that have accused me of not writing about white people. I remember a review of Sula in which the reviewer said, this is all well and good, but one day she, meaning me, will have to face up to the real responsibilities and get mature and write about the real confrontation for black people, which is white people. As though our lives have no meaning and no depth without the white gaze. And I've spent my entire writing life trying to make sure that the white gaze was not the dominant one in any of my books. And the people who helped me most arrive at that kind of language were African writers. Chinua Achebe, Bessie Head, those writers who could assume the centrality of their race because they were Africans.
And they didn't explain anything to white people. Those questions were incomprehensible to them. Those questions that I would have as a minority living in an all-white country like the United States. But when I read the poetry of César, or the poetry of Senghor, or the novels particularly, Things Fall Apart was more important to me than anything. Only because there was a language, there was a posture, there were the parameters. I could step in now, and I didn't have to be consumed by or be concerned by the white gaze. That was the liberation for me. It has nothing to do with who reads the books. Everyone, I hope, of any race, any gender, any country. But my sovereignty and my authority as a racialized person had to be struck immediately with the very first book. And it was strange because in this country, many books, particularly then, 40s, 50s, you could feel the address of the narrator over my shoulder, talking to somebody else, talking to somebody white. I could tell because they're explaining things that they didn't have to explain if they were talking to me. It was that. So it's profound for me. So that I may be, you may be right, maybe I'm over-dramatizing the whole question, which was innocent enough because the problem of being free to write the way you wish to without this other racialized gaze is a serious one for an African-American writer. Very serious.
I think this is one of those times where what you just said, you gave and ennobled an answer, regardless of the significance
that's good.
of the question.
So with these videos, I just wanted you to kind of step into kind of the knowledge of Toni Morrison, get to know a little bit more about who this writer is and just how important The Bluest Eye is as a piece of American literature. There are library resources that I'll go to really briefly so we can eat and have fun. Let's do BCC Library. Okay, and so I'm going to take you to the one search tool we have here, which allows you to gather all of the library's collection into one location. And the easiest thing to do is to type in the author's name. You don't have to capitalize anything. And right now I'm actually looking at BCC and CUNY libraries. I can limit it to just BCC, which I'd like to do right now. And as we scroll down, you'll see some of her titles. And so we know this is something she's written because she's listed here as the author. So The Bluest Eye, which is the one you all have now, Song of Solomon. So these are her major 8 novels listed here. So we have them for you. And we also have, if I go back to the library website, in addition to OneSearch, there are also databases that you can use. So that video the video I actually took it from YouTube. However, there are many videos that exist, particularly on Films on Demand. And so with Films on Demand, you can also do the same where you type in Toni Morrison. And then you'll find clips. So as I mentioned, she's done many interviews and she's just mesmerizing to watch. And there are also videos and recordings that have been done talking about her work. So that's something, if you want to explore more about her, you can find information about her in video form here in Films on Demand. We also have other areas that you can go to, which include Academic Video Online, Avon. And so again, the same search for Toni Morrison we can do here. And then we also receive some footage about Toni Morrison here. And we also have a literature resource center. So folks that want to get biographical information on her can also get information on her from Literature Resource Center and information about her books, like a synopsis about her titles. And you can also, if we go into his biography and context, yes. Again, we do an easy search, Toni Morrison. She already has a place in Gale in context. She has a section. And to learn more about her, you can do that with this specific database, but there are others too. So at any point, if you want to learn more, you can ask at the reference desk, ask any of the librarians, and we can show you where to go to find more information about her. And so the final thing that I'll show you all is what's next. So right after this book party next week, on the 29th, during club hours, which is going to be a regular club hour day, it's going to be a regular Thursday, in Roscoe Brown Playhouse, we're going to be streaming the Toni Morrison documentary, The Pieces I Am. So this is another partnership with the library, Womxn Up, and Social Justice Network. You don't have to RSVP, you just have to show up. And this is...
My grandfather bragged all...
Sorry. This is a trailer. This is a little... This is already kind of loud.
Bragged all the time. My grandfather bragged all the time that he had read the Bible. And it was illegal in his life to read. Ultimately, I knew that words have power.
I wanted as many people who could hear my voice to understand the importance of her work. Get people to trust, oh, this is something safe, and then bam, hit them with Toni Morrison. One of the early reviews says she's got a great talent. One day she won't limit it to only writing about Black people. Like, really, it's limited for her to write about Black people? People began to buy Toni Morrison, and then we began to teach her, and as a consequence, they had to pay attention.
You know, you'd sick unto death of being labeled a black writer.
I prefer it.
Oh, I thought you probably were tired of it.
Well, I'm tired of people asking the question.
Oh, yes,
I don't know where this woman's energy came from to raise two kids, to bring other people of color to the party, and also write these novels.
Toni was an editor at Random House.
Navigating a white male world was not threatening. It wasn't even interesting. I was more interesting than they were. And I wasn't afraid to show it.
Suddenly, the canon wasn't the pride or property of white male writers.
I've thrown this book across the room and then walked down the steps laughing. Like, you read Toni and you cry, but you gotta laugh.
Texas Bureau of Corrections banned Paradise because it might incite a riot. And I thought, how powerful is that?
When Toni Morrison published Beloved, it was an extraordinary turning point. We can never think about slavery in the same way.
A friend of mine called me up early in the morning and said, Toni, you won the Nobel Prize. And I remember holding the phone thinking, she must be drunk.
Toni Morrison's work shows us through pain all the myriad ways we can come to love. That is what she does. With some words on a page.
And that's it. Let me get to the next slide. Sorry, that's not it. All right, so we have one more. I have one more slide of her quote, and thank you.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to say that not getting off topic of being on topic, that little conversation just now with Charlie Rose, it was deep. And I don't know how anybody just sat here and if you didn't feel anything from listening to that. That was just deep, and that just made me more want to investigate even more. Like, I've read several of her books, but now I'm like, oh, you know what? I want to listen to her talk some more. You know, that's like the books are fine, but just that conversation, that was just so deep. And yeah, I want to even look at some more of her videos and her conversations with other people, because that was deep. Okay, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not talking loud enough.
Can we
This
all?
is my relationship with our director. Don't worry, we act like this all the time. Again, my name is Catherine Parsons. I've been at BCC since 1988. I started off as a part-time person here, working part-time. I was going to Lehman. I never went to BCC. Don't ask me why. We ain't gonna get into that. But I have a bachelor's in accounting. I have a master's in library science. I got that in 2001. When I started working here, like I said, I was a college work study student, and I just never left because I like BCC and I like students. When I first started at BCC, I wouldn't talk to y'all if y'all paid me because I was just a shy person. I was one of those people, keep me in the bag, don't ask me no questions. I'm like this. But working with students all of these years, I enjoy it. I really do, from my heart, love being with you and helping you out. That's my job, that's my life, and I'm happy doing it.
We love you, Kathy.
Now I'm going to read this quote from Toni Morrison. I tell my students, when you get these jobs that you have been so brilliantly trained for, just remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to free somebody else. If you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else. This is not just a grab bag candy game. Toni Morrison.
Thank you. So we end on that. Thanks for bearing with us through the introduction. So now you know a little more, and we'll keep you posted about events. And the food bar is open. You may take what you like. And a book, too. Yes.
I spied a lot of blank paper. What's going on with the project here?
So Professor King, would you like to talk more about that with your students?
What are we doing? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Well, hi everybody, I'm happy to be here, and these are my fantastic, talented, wonderful, excellent students from Art 25. I learned about this program from my good friend Emma, and I said, oh, I have to bring my students, and they can draw, because that's our class, is drawing. So they're busy drawing in response to their environment. They've been eyeing the food for some time now, so I think maybe to let them go there. But they're here to learn and experience about BCC Reads and Toni Morrison, the amazing Toni Morrison, and her book. And we might even do a drawing project about her book later. So thank you all for having us.
Thank you.
And
I'll often say, if you all figure out the 3 best drawings from the event, I'd love to frame them.
I like that offer.
Art in the library.
Yeah, that would be lovely.
yeah, that's wonderful.
Thank you, Professor Miller. Thank you, Professor King.
Hey, can I just?
Catherine?
Yes, Catherine Parsons.
I just want to add to what Catherine astutely said about Morrison's wonderful performance in that Charlie Rose interview. Charlie Rose is a very problematic man for a variety of reasons, and he has many faults as an interviewer. Among them being that he, more often than not, hogs the stage and does most of the talking in the interview, giving his guests very little time to respond to his lengthy questions and then talking over their responses. I've never seen anyone make him shut up for as long as Toni Morrison did in that interview. I do not believe, based on his response, that he understood one word that she was saying to him, but he knew enough not to talk over her, and that tells you a tremendous amount about her as a speaker and as a presence in a conversation.
Excellent observation.
I really like the quote, and I would like to have a better understanding of what that quote actually means to an audience today who hears it. You know, what do some of the students think about that quote? Most of you, you know, really, you know, your parents may not have even been born when Toni Morrison started writing, and a lot of us are from other places, so we don't necessarily have the American and the African American foundation of experience in terms of to looking at life through that lens. So I would be interested in what some of the students might think, or their perspective on the importance of Toni Morrison, and I guess even of how does she fit into your time. Some years ago we did a play by Douglas Turner Ward called Day of Absence, in which we did it on campus, in which the play was about a southern town where folks wake up one day and all the black people are gone. And so initially everybody's happy because folks in the South don't necessarily want a lot of black people around. But then as the day moves on, they realize that they cannot function without the African American. When we did the play here, we also extended that understanding because though we weren't in the South, we were in the United States during the era of the immigration debates. And what would America do if we woke up and the immigrants that we so horribly talk about had disappeared? It's a different time, but the construct, I think, still needs to be kind of investigated. And how does this generation, how they might relate and come to some understanding? Hope that made some sense.
Yeah, good question. And this is also one of our librarians here at BCC, Julio Carrillo.
Hey, how you doing, Chad? My name is Julio, and that's a very professor. First and foremost, Toni Morrison to me is an American treasure. Dead or alive, she's an American treasure. I don't know if I can, I can't answer the question. I'm not their generation, but I'm probably, I can be their parents, right? And I'm the son of immigrants. And I think what that quote meant is just keep pulling your people up. Keep pulling your people up, and don't forget where you come from. Because success can lead you to places that are great, to the top of the mountain. But you got to keep pulling your people up with you to be on the top of the mountain with you. Even if it's one person, two people, just keep pulling people up. Because that's what you should do. And I think that's what that meant. Now, I don't know about the younger people, but from my point of view as a child of immigrants, exactly what would this country be without it, right? And at the same time, the debate that we're going to have and we're going to continue to have. But at the end of the day, I think she was an American treasure, and I just wanted to say this.
All right, students, we don't want to bring back any food, so please do take some plates through here. There's some hand sanitizer here too, so you can use that to bring your food. And I'll put the music back on.
That's like a resume, right?